Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, The Internet Playbook, featuring Jefferies Analyst Brent Thill and NetSuite SVP of Marketing and Strategy, Jason Maynard. My name is Kelly Scott. I'm the Software Industry Marketing Lead here at NetSuite, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. This webcast is designed to be interactive. The console you are looking at can be completely customized, and you can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. At the bottom of your console are multiple application widgets that you can use. If you do have questions, we encourage you to submit them by clicking on the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try and answer these questions during the Q&A session towards the end, but if we don't get to them on time, someone from NetSuite will follow up with you. We are also providing a complimentary copy of the Jefferies report, as well as additional materials you may find useful. Please feel free to download them for your reference. Finally, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please click on the Help button that can provide answers to common technical questions. And now, I'd like to introduce our host for today, Jason Maynard.
All right, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. And welcome, everyone, to the Internet Playbook, Jefferies Top 10 Predictions with the world-famous analyst, Brent Thill. We are really excited to have Brent today. I'm going to walk you guys through a little bit of our agenda, and then we are going to jump into the interview with Brent. So I'm going to give you a little bit of Brent's background and why he's one of the most listened to and read analysts on Wall Street. We're going to go through his top 10 internet predictions, and then, Kelly said, we will open it up for Q&A at the end. So there's Brent on the left, nice shiny picture. I'm on the right. For those of you who don't know Brent Thill, he's an equity analyst at Jefferies in the research department. Before that, he was a managing director and senior analyst at UBS. Brent was part of the software group and covered enterprise software for many years. He's been a top-ranked II analyst. That means he's one of the best guys in the space and really understands software, internet, and the whole technology landscape. He's been on the street now, I think, for how many years, Brent? Almost 20? Is that about right? I think it's about 20 years?
Yeah.
20. That means he's old, but he's got a nice head of hair, not like me in that picture. And then before that, he actually, I forgot about this, he actually worked in the IT department at Piper Jaffray building applications, which is a good thing you got out of that and onto Wall Street, because that's a tough job. So congratulations. And Brent, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for having me. Looking forward to the chat.
All right, so let's dive into this. So Brent came out with a fantastic research report, correct me if I'm wrong, a couple of months ago when you launched coverage of the internet space. Maybe tell people what's in the report, and then we'll dive into your predictions.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I spent 20 years covering software, and I was asked to make the move over to internet. And I think we view in the tech world the convergence of the internet and software happening. You look at what's happened with Amazon and what they've done with AWS, obviously building one of the largest infrastructure businesses in the world in software. So we were asked to come in and lead that team. As part of that, I spent 2 months visiting 40 private companies. We went and visited Google and all of the public internet companies, and the team, we all sat down, and my partner, Brian Fitzgerald, who worked with Mary Meeker, who worked at Morgan Stanley and is a venture capitalist now. He's my partner in New York. We effectively, as a team, sat down, just kind of had time to rethink about what's happening in the industry. And so every year in software, we put out a top 10 prediction, and this year, we again are doing the same thing. So we do this at the beginning of the year, and then we grade ourselves at the end of the year. So we take these very serious, and we want, some of these are effectively, not necessarily mainstream picks, but we try to think about what could be around the corner and, what could shock investors. And so we've tried to incorporate what we think is across both large, mid, and cap technology stories and thematic trends that we're seeing that shapes the industry. And just by way of background, as Jason said, I've been in Silicon Valley for 20 years, and we've had the opportunity to interact with Microsoft and Oracle, all the senior management teams across all of software, and now we've done that in internet. So it just gave us a fresh perspective and looking at the space.
That's great. So let's dive in then to the questions here. So let me make sure I click the button here. Prediction number one. Brent, take it away. Your top prediction or your biggest number one prediction.
Yeah, our predictions are trying to also tie to investment recommendations. Our clients are the top money managers on Wall Street, so Fidelity's, Putnam's, you go through the list, hedge funds globally. Jefferies has a very global platform, and so our number one objective is to try to help educate investors, also to help them make money. And so our top prediction was that Facebook stock would outperform Google and Amazon over the next 12 months. And the reason why we picked Facebook was a couple of reasons. Number one, Facebook is growing at, twice the growth rates of Google and Amazon on the top line. They're growing over 40%. They also happen to be very profitable, so they have margins over 40%. And that, again, Google has had margins in the 40s but have faded into the low 30s, and Amazon does not really have margins. Their focus is on the top line revenue growth. So we viewed Facebook as a very balanced story on top line and bottom line growth, as well as, the overhang of regulatory. One of the biggest issues that we're getting from investors on Google is, it seems like the regulators are trying to break them up or change their way. On Amazon, obviously you can't read a Donald Trump text about, them trying to pay more taxes. And so we think, while Facebook has concern over, fake news and, some of the things that's been happening, but we think, again, they probably have the least amount of overhangs, and certainly, we think in terms of the setup of the numbers that we look at, still is in a very favorable position. The big next driver for Facebook will be around video. So we saw kind of the first wave of Facebook of being able to see pictures and text and transact commerce when you see something you like, and it can take you to a page through advertising. The next big move will be in video, and we think that they can do this in a profitable way, and again, a really interesting setup in our view. One thing that may not be apparent to Main Street, but is on Wall Street, Facebook actually communicates, I think, clearer also with investors. And I think this is one thing I've been somewhat disappointed by, having covered software and working with Microsoft and Oracle and other companies in the past. The communication's been pretty clear. It's harder to communicate with some of these companies. And I think Facebook's done a better job relative to its peer group. So that's also helpful with investors, just feeling that they really can have an outreach and really understand the stories. And so I think we applaud Facebook for the way they've handled this.
Brent, you made an interesting point here about margins, and I think it's the Amazon example for when they announced the Whole Foods acquisition. I think it was a 13-point-something billion acquisition, and I think the stock went up in an amount greater than what they were paying for Whole Foods. So Wall Street was clearly applauding the deal and giving them, if you will, extra credit for the potential synergy. How long does this, in your view, this sort of lack of focus or lack of concern around margins, it's really not just an Amazon question, but just really any of these sort of high growth businesses, are we late cycle in terms of folks caring more about the top line? When does the bottom line become part of the investment thesis? And is this just part of the secular shift that folks are going to pay for the winners no matter what, and margins will be, margin promise will be deferred to the future?
Yeah, Jason, it's a good question. Many of you know probably Jason was a leading Wall Street analyst before he made the move. He's obviously got good questions. I would say that top line growth, can't be the only focus. I think, this is one of the byproducts of the tech meltdown, right, which was, you can't generate revenue at any cost forever. And I think that what really kind of changed the thesis on Amazon was really the advent of AWS with, their cloud computing initiative. And, historically they had not broken out that business, but I think what everyone realized that when they broke that out is that business is, multiple times bigger than any of its competitors, and it's actually very profitable. Selling, crayons and T-shirts online is a lot less profitable. So I think the thing that Amazon has done well is demonstrated that inside the core business, there's a really profitable engine that's growing, and it has high recurring revenue and visibility, and that has helped, I think, reshape the view of Amazon's just going to keep spending into oblivion, and it's just top line growth and no bottom line. So I think that ultimately, they care about the bottom line, but it is a land grab for market share. And, I don't know if anyone's been watching, but, this little company, Walmart, is actually doing a really good job kind of reinventing themselves, and they're partnering with Google to do things that they couldn't do before. There's certainly a lot of interesting initiatives that Amazon keeps having to spend because they have some big competitors. And so we think that it won't last forever. That's why we like Facebook better, given how profitable they are and what they're doing. So, one side of this could be Amazon's got a tremendous amount of margin levers over time. At some point, right, they've effectively kind of cut off the oxygen to many others, and there's only room for margin improvement. Some of the bears on Facebook will say, well, Google's margins were in the 40s, and they went to the low 30s because they had to spend on other things beyond search. So maybe Facebook has more downward pressure on margins over time. I think, we think it's all about balance, but I think Amazon has been able to at least show that inside their AWS business, that business is one of the most profitable businesses that they run.
Great. That's interesting. Let's, since we've got 10 predictions here, let's jam on to the second prediction. I'm going to click here. So prediction number 2, Facebook will grow its reach of the global population to nearly 40%. So talk us through about the international story there on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, today Facebook reaches roughly 25% of the world's population. I think, our view is that clearly there's a tremendous opportunity international to grow that reach. Obviously, the advent of mobile devices is making this easier, and the new services that they've unveiled, whether it's Instagram or the messaging apps, and they've talked a lot about even with Messenger. Today they haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the monetization strategy, but there's a big opportunity for them to monetize, the ability to communicate with a lot of different ways, whether it's advertising led or it's an embedded service where you pay a subscription to embed. So it's our belief, also with the tailwind of video. My kids really don't know what Comcast is. They know what Netflix is. They know what YouTube is, and the being able to watch the video you want to watch when you want to watch it is really important. So the move to video, I think, will be a real big tailwind for everyone in the sense of, that's the way we all lead busy lives, and we want to spend the time that we have free watching the things we want to watch. And then the ability to tie advertising into those things. I think most of us believe, are annoyed by advertising, but when I'm advertising something that I like, whether I'm looking for a great restaurant in San Francisco or I'm looking for a place in Malibu to stay or whatever, right? You want, I don't mind advertising. And so I think what Facebook has figured out is a way to engage people, but also provide a way to monetize through advertising in a way that these end users, it doesn't bother them. And I think there's a big opportunity in our view to actually look at that, and that it leads to overall average selling price improvement per user if they can continue along the path that they've been on. So it's our belief, again, that there's very few that are kind of in front of them and few barriers. It may sound like a big number to get to 40%, but when you think about, they're already at 25% of the world's population, and they just unveiled increasing monthly active users on Instagram to over 800 million. I mean, they're certainly doing a lot of things, I think, they're doing things very well, and they're also doing things in a responsible way, even though it may perceive to be that sometimes that they're doing things that may not appeal to end users. But we think they're doing it better than most. In terms of prediction 3 is around digital video consumption. It was more around the theme we were talking about, the move to the video. When you look at what's happening with Netflix and YouTube, and again, this whole concept of cord cutting. You see the traditional media company stocks, really challenged, and you see kind of the tailwind that you're seeing behind Google and Facebook. A lot of this is being driven, by video and what I said earlier. So I think what we're seeing is, today that there is a $200 billion global TV ad market. Just to put that in context, the overall software industry is, something in the orders of kind of $350 billion. So just the global TV ad market is massive. And you're seeing all these traditional media companies trying to transition and figure out a strategy. You've seen what happened with ESPN and trying to move away and create their own service, and some of the things that Disney has said, where they want to create their own entity online and awareness. We think this is going to be very good for Facebook, for Google, potentially for Snap, which is a big question. It wasn't a very popular IPO out of the gate and hasn't done well. They've missed the first 2 quarters out of the gate. But we think that format that Snap has is built for video, it's built for mobile, and that there is still an incoming tidal wave, if you will, for video for Snap. There's another company called Trade Desk that we cover, the ticker's TTD. They actually help ad agencies put in a programmatic platform so that customers can actually figure out, okay, what is the best time to find, the right audience, say it's age 12 to 16 that's interested in this type of music, and what's the right format to get to them? And these are questions that they can help answer for their clients. So we see, the move to video impacting Facebook, Google, Snap, and Trade Desk in a very favorable way. I would say right now it's really been almost an 80% Facebook, Google world, and those are kind of the 2 big ones to watch. So I think, again, I don't believe that my kids will have Comcast in their home in 15 years. I think they will be subscribing to a variety of services that they can subscribe to via these solutions. And I think this is early in the formation, but effectively those vendors will be able to take market share away from the traditional ad market.
Hey, Brent, I'm back here, and I apologize for the audio problems. But one follow-up on your prediction 3. What do you model, and how do you when you build your sort of your multi-year forecast in terms of looking at basically Facebook, Google, Snap? What are you assuming they are going to do on the content front? Because we've seen a toe in the water with Amazon on doing some of the streaming with the NFL. Twitter was doing some of this. What do you think sort of the big 3 or 4 internet companies are going to do in terms of perhaps following the path of a Netflix, or do you see them moving into live sports? How do you sort of handicap that next strategic play?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think we see kind of Netflix obviously is willing to pay up and make the big investments. I would say that Amazon is, Jeff Bezos been recently quoted telling his head of studios to go and find the next Game of Thrones. That is not a cheap initiative. So I would say Amazon feels like they're all in and they're pushing as hard as they can. And if any of you have the Amazon Echo show, which I have in my kitchen, you can effectively fire up content anytime you want. It's with your voice command, and it's really, really easy. So you can kind of see where they're going with this, right? You want to order a bar of soap, you can, but if you want to order Home Alone movie and you want it to play instantaneously, right, it makes a lot of sense. That's the direction that they're pushing very hard. Google and Facebook are a little more of a question mark, where is this going to be more, we generate our own content as users put it up and others subscribe. My son happens to be just addicted to a blogger named Logan Paul. I don't know him, but he's had incredible success, and I think it's measured in the millions of end users that watch him. Facebook recently announced, or at least the chatter was, that they're going to put $1 billion into this content move. Our view would be that it's not going to be massive investment in 1 or 2 areas. It'll be across different areas. There's been some chatter about them bidding on the cricket rights, and everyone says, why would they bid so much for cricket? And if you want to read a really good book, read Satya Nadella's new book, which is a phenomenal book. And, I didn't realize this, but the cricket market, there's 2.5 billion people watching cricket versus 500 million that watch baseball. So, they're going to gear, I think, their content dollars a little differently. I don't expect Facebook's going to have the same budget that Netflix will. Longer term, is there a way that these guys can cooperate together? I wouldn't rule it out. Is there some type of strategy where Facebook can go with a lower end content, but engaging content? But you think about the 2 billion people that Facebook have today, Jason. They know what you're watching. They can form a view, and they can actually serve you what you may not know it's there, but the ability to use AI and machine learning to understand what you want to watch, I think, is pretty powerful. So I think there's a lot more to come. We don't know all the answers. I think Sheryl Sandberg has been quoted that, they still are experimenting with this, and we're kind of in the early formation. So I think it's pretty exciting. Facebook has a product called Watch. I think some of our clients thought it was actual physical watch. It's actually a ability to watch shows and video. So stay tuned, but it's early, and we think it could be super, super promising long term.
Yeah, well, and for those of you out there, Logan Paul has, I think, 12.5 million YouTube subscribers. So it's this. I think you have to be between the ages of like 10 and 13 to pay attention to that. But it's a pretty big count, so it's kind of crazy.
It's an interesting point.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jason, I think one of the things that I've watched having 3 kids is just watching their behaviors and how they shift from how we grew up, right? And it's really been dominated by an Apple platform on the hardware with Facebook and Instagram and Netflix, as well as YouTube, and then the video game sector, right, with Activision, Electronic Arts. I mean, there's a standard stack, I think, of when we interview teenagers and how they're growing up, and Snap has a big role in that as well. So it's very, very fascinating to watch. Sometimes hard to understand, but those seem to be the names that they continue to be addicted to.
Yeah, no. A few years ago, when you start to see like your 3-year-old try and swipe the television screen to change the channel, you knew there was something going on. So, all right, let's move to question 4. This is going to shift gears a little bit, but back to Amazon and specifically AWS. You've got this is a big number here in terms of the prediction for Amazon Web Services. What's behind your prediction here in terms of how fast they will grow?
Yeah, so spending 20 years in software, right? When we asked most of the companies we work with, what do they use their infrastructure stack, 90% said, Amazon, AWS, at least in some parts of their business, right? And they'll use a number of other vendors, Oracle and Microsoft and others, and we're definitely a big believer in the hybrid cloud. But I would say that Amazon, kind of in the pure public cloud, had really become the dominant factor. Their lead over Microsoft and Google Cloud is effectively 4 times larger than Microsoft and 8 times larger than Google's revenue stream. So it's about a $16 billion revenue stream today, which is a big number. We think by 2022, AWS can get to $55 billion in revenue. And we effectively then, what does that mean for Amazon stock? We think today Amazon stock is roughly about half a trillion dollars. So we think that market cap can grow to $750 billion to $1 trillion of value over a 5-year period. And the way we get there is the sum of the parts, and we break Amazon into 2 businesses, right? You have the Amazon AWS business, and then you have all of the other businesses at Amazon, which we put into 2 simple buckets. The AWS business, we think, again, getting to $55 billion is not a stretch given the growth rates they've had, given the dominance they've had. If they can get to $55 billion, most investors have looked at some of these high recurring, franchises, on a multiple of sales. And we think you could put a 5 multiple on that $55 billion, which gets you well north of $300 billion of value. if you look at, again, Amazon's overall market cap today is close to, $500 billion. So, if you put a very low multiple on the rest of Amazon's business, you would effectively get anywhere in between a $750 million, $1 billion to $1 trillion cap, again, up from $500 billion today. So, we see, pretty material acceleration for the stock over a 5-year period. It's hard to call quarter to quarter, and there's going to be, pullbacks of 5 to 10, 15% at times. But ultimately, I think as you've looked at Amazon's chart, right, this is one that continues to trend higher, and certainly a lot of risk factors. And I don't want to I want to make sure we are very fair and balanced in our opinion on this. But if they continue to do this, we don't think that's a stretch to close in on that $1 trillion cap at some point.
That's okay. Let's click to number 5, prediction 5, because it does tie in a little bit here in terms of what you're saying. And prediction 5, you talk about 2018 being a breakout year for Google Cloud. So what's happening there with Google's cloud business?
Yeah, I mean, in similar to what Amazon did with their infrastructure, right? They realized that this massive platform they had built for their retail side was also very powerful to help our commercial companies. And I think in many ways, Google has been late to the party, right? Microsoft, again, read Nadella's recent book that's out from the CEO of Microsoft, and talks about, what they missed mobile and they had to get cloud. And Nadella was really the one that pivoted the company in the server business to Microsoft Azure. Azure today is the second leading vendor in terms of revenue in the pure public cloud, and he's done a fantastic job. Google is number 3, and Google, both Amazon and Microsoft break out the revenue for both of those businesses. Google does not, but we estimate that business to be north of $2 billion, and Microsoft's 4 and Amazon's 16. So when you think about the opportunity for Google Cloud, we think it's pretty massive. So what have they done to kind of earn this, hey, we think 18 is a breakout year, when they're so far behind the other two? One, they put Diane Greene in, who was the founder of VMware. She's been on the Google board for many years. She is considered one of the, obviously the success of VMware, what she was able to do is incredible. And Diane is, viewed, I think, among the developer community, the IT community is extremely favorable, and she can talk their language. She's very technical. She also, understands kind of the constraints that these companies are facing. So the fact that they put Diane in charge of that with her own operating team, and they've been adding dedicated sales resources, we think there's a tremendous opportunity that in large enterprises, it won't be a single cloud world. It'll be multiple clouds. It'll be a mix of private and public, and we think there's a big opportunity for Google to play. And where's Google winning? Today you don't have the big, large enterprise references. I think they've talked about Coca-Cola, who's also an AWS client. They've talked about Pinterest and Snap and a few of other companies that are built on the Google Cloud. We think there's going to be building enterprise referenceability. They've made some smart moves in elevating certain key executives. They're getting better performance. And I think when the customers we've spoke with have decided to go with Google, they say, look, performance, reliability, and then their AI capability are really differentiations. So we think there's a big opportunity for Google. Again, the smallest of the 3, but certainly in our view, if you're Ruth Porat, who's the CEO of Google, CFO, I apologize, you look at the other 2 vendors, they've broken out their revenue streams from these cloud initiatives. Since Amazon did that, the stock is up 150%. Since Microsoft did this and said they're going to be $20 billion in commercial cloud, the stock is up 50%. So I as a analyst would say, is this something, if you're the CEO, the senior management team at Google, do you want to talk more about, given the positive implications and what Wall Street saw on this? And I would think the answer is yes. So we'll keep you posted. It's still early. Certainly it's probably one of the more controversial picks, but I think they're kind of on the right road, if you will, from what we can see.
Let's go. You referenced AI, and I think that's an interesting area. And let's go on to prediction 6, because I think that'll be something we probably should talk a little bit about here. And there's all sorts of I think positive and perhaps scary implications. So prediction 6, AI has all the hype, but only a few winners will emerge. Talk through your view on what's going to happen with AI.
Yeah, I mean, every company has an AI slide. 2 years ago, everyone was a big data company. A few years ago, everyone's a SaaS company, right? It's the local rage in the valley. We think there's no question it makes sense, right? Having Alexa in your bathroom and ask Alexa what the weather is and how she dress for work, or what's the upcoming concerts coming into town, like things that just make your life easier, right? I mean, there's no question that this is going to permeate automobiles and your home music system to what you're doing at work. No question. I think our view is that you can't just win with technology, you have to win with the data. And so we think, our view, the big companies like Oracle, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, these are going to be the stories that win because they have the most customer data in the commercial and consumer world, and then they also have the technology to marry. So I don't think that the AI companies are in trouble. I think what's going to happen is most of the AI companies will get acquired. There will be fewer IPOs than I think what most people think around AI. I may be wrong on this, but I do think you're going to see a lot more consolidation, and that's probably going to be a result in more M&A than actual initial public offerings around AI. So that would be, again, our view. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we see, more independent companies get out, but I think it may be difficult based on what we continue to hear from some of the bigger companies.
Okay. Let's go on to prediction 7. You've touched a little bit on this in terms of the video market, but Amazon extends into the gaming space. So I know you spent a lot of time around the traditional video game market over the years. What do you see Amazon doing in this category?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you think about Amazon today, like no one thought, I didn't certainly think 4 years ago I would have these devices scattered throughout my house and I could say, play Coldplay or play Jamestown Revival, and the music would instantly stream up without me having to touch a dial. And I think it's the same thing in video games, which is video games are taking over as a form of entertainment in a bigger way than we ever thought, right? And you see it in-game content where you buy the game, but the number of downloadable items that you can purchase to help you in the game or help you, battle your competitor, those downloadable items have a way higher margin or an incredible revenue stream for the companies like Activision, the EA, Take-Two. And so what we think is that given that Amazon cares about entertainment in the form of Amazon Music, Amazon Video, we think that they are a big reseller of video games, but those video games have to be put into the mail, they have to be shipped to your house, you have to buy an Xbox, you have to download it, and the whole process is just, it's like buying a DVD. Going forward, it's going to be as easy as saying, Amazon play Top Gun. You're going to be able to do the same thing with video games. And we think not only is Amazon going to play in this role, an important role, we think Microsoft with Azure and their back end that's helping power their entertainment business will also be a player. So I think you're going to see, I think there's kind of a twist on this that we think there's been for years is if you've gone to E3, which is the big video game conference, that there's been the shift to go to away from buying the disc. And again, it's harder to do in really high-end games. But we think the technology will be available over time, and we think Amazon could play an important role in taking the friction out for consumers.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, you see it now today with all the downloadable content, even within like Sony PlayStation Network and others, where it's all a digital download, and it's better than it was, but you're probably right. There's probably a lot of room in this space. Let's go to prediction 8. One of the things that was interesting to me when you made this prediction about the travel market is that it's no winner take all, and a lot of the internet categories are the opposite, where it is a winner take all, and you see a dominant vendor emerge and take substantial economics. There's only one social network. There's not 3 anymore. So talk to us about the travel space and what's going on there and why that's a more fragmented industry.
Yeah, think about the travel industry, and I still think, we covered Concur way back when, which was acquired by SAP, but, they always talked about the perfect trip. Steve Singh always pushed this. And you think about it, there is no perfect trip right now. You got to go to Uber to book the car, and then you go to a hotel to book the hotel, and then there's travel, and there's an activity you want to do with your family, and you've got to go book that separate. And it's still not perfect, and we're a long, long ways away. And so the CEO of Priceline, Steve Expedia, talk about this, that today this is a over $1 trillion industry. 10% of GDP comes from travel. It's a huge, huge industry, highly fragmented, and there's the continued shift today. Half the world in travel is online, half the world is still manual, and so there's a tremendous opportunity to still, automate, this whole industry. And there's a lot of different players that are playing very interesting roles in having this happen. Priceline and Expedia they're really 2 big independent OTAs that effectively help aggregate travel. Priceline has been a phenomenal stock. It's incredibly well run, and it effectively has double the operating margin of Expedia. Pretty similar growth rates, but double the operating margin. And so, we like Priceline because it's one of the best execution stories, and we like Expedia because we think there's a big difference in margins and there's a lot of room for improvement. Obviously, there's a lot of hangover on this industry given what's happened with the fires in Napa and the unfortunate incidents that happened with the earthquakes, and there's a lot of, I think, there's probably the biggest overhang in this group from investors right now, but we think it's still long-term a phenomenal play. And as Jason said, there is no Google of travel. I think everyone's frightened of what's going on with Google and what's happening, but they have to walk a fine line in the space because both Priceline and Expedia pay them billions of dollars a year for paid search. So, Google is the one to watch. Priceline and Expedia are kind of the 2 established gorillas, if you will. And then you have some really interesting startup companies that are trying to disrupt the industry, and we think there's room. But again, in social networking, there's not room for multiple vendors. There's room for 1 or 2. Same thing in search. Same thing in a lot of these other categories. So we think, again, a lot of runway to go. Both those companies are growing their top line double digit and very well run. And obviously, Uber made the decision to take out the CEO of Expedia to be their new CEO, and I think it speaks volumes to the quality of that business and what's happening in that industry.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Let's since we're got about 20 minutes left here, we'll crank out a couple more and then we'll go to questions. But number 9, maybe make a few comments here about your prediction around the small business basket. I'm curious here about what you see going on in the world of small business.
Yeah, I think this is kind of our commercial background where, we spoke to a lot of CIOs among commercial companies, and, they run Oracle, they'll run Salesforce, they'll run multiple technologies, and the small businesses are all the same as well. Actually, on average, I was with the CEO of Intuit earlier in the week visiting investors in Southern California, and, the average small company uses 17 different technologies to run their business. They'll use QuickBooks in the back office. They'll use Square for payments. They'll use GoDaddy for their website. They'll use Salesforce or, another vendor for the front office. And so, it's our belief that there are going to be a handful of small business platforms that are created. And this has been a really good space to be in. If you look at Shopify, right, in commerce, how do you battle Amazon? Well, you can build your own commerce site if you're grandmassewing.com. And you look at the performance of Shopify stock. Intuit's stock has been one of the most resilient stories. And you know, when you look at what they're doing in accounting, GoDaddy and Wix building a small business operating system for the front office, your website creation, your email, your marketing software for the front office for very small businesses. And then look at what Yelp has done, you know, an incredible job of building, you know, an ecosystem where consumers can get trust in these small businesses and where to go and how to engage with those small businesses. So we think, you know, there's been a great basket of names. There's not one name in that space, and so we've also kind of advocated, you know, owning a group of those stories, and they've all been pretty good names over the last several years. So we don't really see that changing. I would add the only caveat is we are a little more worried about the equity markets. Obviously, equities have had a very good run, but fundamentally, we think, you know, those companies are in really good positions.
No, that's interesting. I think if there was just a way to get a suite of applications delivered over the internet to run a business, there was just one company that could solve that problem. All the applications in one suite over the net. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. Maybe we don't want to go into that. There is one leader
in above these vendors, and it is definitely comes up in our conversation. We talk to the CFOs and heads of finance that there's really kind of a runaway freight train there, so we can talk about that later.
We won't talk about that today. That's not the point of the call. So anyways, let's go to prediction 10. This one doesn't really apply to us, but this is kind of wacky one. Swipe right on online dating. So you're a big bull on online dating, on the opportunity here. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a hard one for many of us in your, you know, late 30s to 60s that are married, have kids, have a significant other, right? You kind of go, you bring this up, and everyone looks at you like you're from outer space. But believe it or not, today, you know, many of today, you know, roughly 25 to 30% of people are meeting online today, and so for that number to double in the next 5 years is not out of question. And one of the companies we cover, Match, the ticker is MTCH. Take a look at that stock. It matches a collection of 45 brands. So you could effectively be over 50 and there's our time. You could be on Core Match. You could be on OkCupid. They have a collection of assets, and they have Tinder, which is, you know, definitely more around, you know, geared towards, you know, trying to get to know someone due to their looks or their interests or their location. So they gear all the way from, you know, in your late teens, 20s, and all the way up to 50 plus with a collection of great assets. Company went public roughly 6-7 quarters ago. They've beaten every quarter on the bottom line. They have the 4th highest operating margin in the internet industry, and they're owned, majority stake owned by IAC. Pull up that stock, IAC. It's been an incredible return for investors. So our belief, you know, is that when Facebook came along, no one ever thought we'd put our family pictures up online, right? And I think that's been well received. Obviously, I think we think the same thing is happening here. And I always tell my friends, look, if I was in the unfortunate situation where I was single at my age, in my mid-40s, you know, there's just little time in the day given your job, and this helps expedite you meeting the right person. And if you can meet your significant other or a great friend, even a great friendship comes out of this, what would you pay? And in many cases, people are paying $10, $15 a month for the service. So I think the value might be one of the lowest paid for, the highest impact to your life, but maybe one of the lowest value or dollar value that you would pay out. And so I would argue there's tremendous price leverage, and this is why Match stock has gone really ballistic, you know, in the last couple of months, because they unveiled Tinder Gold, which was an upgraded version, a higher end version of paid for Tinder service that let you expedite, meeting the right person. So very well run, new CEO in place, who is very well regarded in the industry, and we think it's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, those are great. These are some fantastic predictions and some really good insight here. And I want to shift, since we've got a little bit of time left, and take a few questions from the audience. So folks, if you want to enter your question into the chat box, I already see a couple in here that I want to make sure we get to. But let me first up, spend a couple minutes and tell us what's going on with the IPO market. Why haven't we seen more tech IPOs?
It's a great question. It's probably the number one question we get from investors. The stock market is at all-time highs, but the number of tech IPOs is effectively down. If you look at the last several years, there's been kind of roughly 20 to 30 plus IPOs, and historically it was running multiple times. And so everyone says, well, with the market doing as well, and with the number of companies that have been funded, why is it just seems like there should be more. I think there's a couple things that are happening that we're seeing across Wall Street. Number one is that the actual investors have changed in the private market. So it used to be the dedicated VCs that focused on tech. Now you see, big conglomerate brands, that are investing. And I'm not saying Target has done this, but Target's CEO was at a Fortune conference, and they partner with Casper, which is a mattress company. I don't know what Target's investment is in Casper or not, but you look at some of these brands that are, taking over in the imagination and taking share from the old world. You're seeing a lot of different investors that are pouring a lot of money into this, whether they're big corporations, whether they're alternative venture capital funds. We have a lot of clients that are historically mutual fund clients that now have private investment arms that are investing. And so capital has been easier to get to. They haven't needed to go public, and they've been flooded with all kinds of capital from so many different directions. So I think probably if there are many CFOs on the line, you know what I'm talking about. It's been very interesting. I've actually had friends that are venture capitalists that have left, and they said, well, why? I said, why did you leave the venture world? They're like, it's too political. It's like you used to go down to doing good work and having good returns, and now it's about like who you know, and these big brands are coming in, big corporations and alternative investors that don't know anything about tech. They're just flooding in. So I think you have this inflow of capital is number one. Number two is some of these business models have not necessarily been quite as proven, and so not to pick on Blue Apron or Snap, but both of those went out, and they both were not well-received IPOs. Obviously, Blue Apron had Amazon drop a competing service in the acquisition of Whole Foods right in the middle of their roadshow. That didn't help. And then, with Snap missing the first 2 quarters out of the gate, I think investor expectations were too high. So I would say bottom line, it's a combination of capital flooding in from a lot of the places we've never seen historically, and they're flush with cash, and there's been no real reason. And they want to take time to make sure they got their business models nailed before they go. And then number two is that other advent. I'd say the third element is we think there are probably more interesting software companies that are more ready to come public than internet companies. In the internet, right, it's a winner take all. They're big, when they get big, they get really big, but there are just fewer of them. So I think you're gonna see that dynamic. I think you'll probably see, at least at this point, potentially a more robust 2018 than 2017, at least from what we can see at a very high level. But stay tuned. It's obviously all market dependent.
Yeah. Okay. One question we just got from the audience here. This is a really interesting one. Will Chinese internet and/or infrastructure firms enter the U.S. market in the next few years in a major way? What are you seeing on the Chinese front? Will they come here?
Yeah, I think you're already seeing it. I opened the Wall Street Journal the other day, and I read about the Alibaba cloud, right? So I think you're beginning to see it. I think, it's if you ask every major tech CEO in the United States what their biggest opportunity, they'd say China, and they'd say, what are you most disappointed in? China. And it's been very difficult, right? And I remember asking Steve Ballmer, at the analyst day at Microsoft, sit next to him at a lunch, and he'd say China, 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 China. And you've seen this even with companies like GoDaddy, who we cover. I think the way a lot of our companies are approaching this is saying, they're welcoming those companies to come, but in terms of our ability to kind of break in, it's been harder. And I think some have said, hey, we want to get into China on the outside in, so we start around the periphery. GoDaddy, Trade Desk have all talked about how they're trying to set up camp in Hong Kong and Singapore and Australia and other you're not going in Japan and trying to kind of appeal. Some of the travel companies have talked about this the same way, which is there are a tremendous amount of Chinese tourists that want to come to the United States, and the ability to be able to help monetize that, by providing infrastructure. And so it's been frustrating for the U.S. companies to move, but they're finding ways to kind of help support that. But everyone universally says number one opportunity, but also on the flip side, I think you're going to see, more Chinese companies trying to come here. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Well, we unfortunately are running out of time here. We've only got a few minutes left, but I want to maybe end with one last question, which is, you're on the road a lot during the year meeting with big, large institutional investors, hedge funds, mutual funds, things of that nature. What's the most frequent thing the big money is asking you about what's going to happen in tech?
The number one question is just valuation. A lot of these stocks have run. I think our perspective is you have to be very selective. Our strategists internally have effectively been telling people to kind of sell some of this into strength and minimize your exposure to equities and build up alternative assets. And I think, the number one question is just asset allocation. Where do we put our money? I'd say number one, I think our view is you have to be very selective. We're now into either the second or third longest running economic cycle we've been in, and that just takes, in our view, it's just a matter of time before we're going to see a pullback. And so it's just, risk adjusting that at this point. We're effectively stay invested in the best stories, but also, you may want to look at how you hedge that out and minimize your risk, given where we're at later in the cycle.
It's interesting that your answer here is valuation. So it does kind of tell you from an investor standpoint that most people are all in on tech. It's not like it's a out of favor sector. It's how late in
the top five market cap names in the market right now are all technology. In the playbook, we talk about this. Back in 2000, right? Citigroup, and there were other non-tech names in the top five, but the top five are all tech, and the majority of them are internet. So, that to me is scary. It's awesome, but it's scary in the sense of that those leaders typically don't last 5 to 10 years down the road, right? The leadership in 2000 changed, and so I think what we're trying to say is, look, there are potential risks and roadblocks here that you got to keep cognizant of. I would say the second one was, the IPO question you asked. I think that's definitely very top of mind because it's been, I think, underwhelming relative to what people thought would come. And then I would say number three is, like, what's Amazon going to get into next? I can't believe that I'm watching my Echo Show in my bathroom, a TV show. They're like, the question is, where do they go next?
Yeah. That's awesome. No, that's great. Well, guys, we're here at the top of the hour. We've unfortunately ran out of time. Brent's report is available for download here at NetSuite, and if you haven't already, we can get you access and copy the report. But I want to really thank you, Brent, for taking time out of your busy day and sharing some, little different insights into the world of internet and technology. And, I appreciate you making time for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for having me. And if anyone would like to report, I certainly can send it to you as well. But appreciate everyone having us. And I also want to highlight there's a number of risks as it relates to these disclosures. So please feel free to reach out to me or Jason to talk through this, because there are other sides of this, and we certainly can walk through a fair and balanced approach to how we look at the world of technology. So thank you again for having me.
Yep. No, and everybody on the line, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us today. If you got any questions, you know how to get a hold of us. And everybody have a great weekend, and thanks again. Take care.